Good morning, Northside. This is Miss Cooper here with your weekly summary review. Want to prepare you for the quiz that you're going to be taking on tomorrow. Want to be sure that you have looked at every single email that I've sent you this week. Look at the attachments, look at all the videos, make sure that you are well versed in those items. Our objectives for this week included analyzing the French Revolution and the reign of Napoleon Bonaparte and discuss their enduring effects on political expectations for self-government and individual liberty. So, throughout the course of this week, we have analyzed the events that created the situation that was known as the French Revolution, from the dissatisfied attitudes of individuals who were reading about and thinking about what the Enlightenment thinkers had to say, their responses to the absolute rulers, the rulers such as Elizabeth I, the rulers in France, including Louis XIV, Louis XVI. Throughout Europe, the reign of absolute rulers was coming to a conclusion when we get into this age of revolutions, when everyone is upset about absolute power and ideas such as the divine right of kings. Those were things that made people very upset. They did not necessarily agree with all of those ideas, and people began to take to the streets and burn things to the ground. The price of bread rising, inflation, making it more difficult to feed your family and provide. It was a very difficult time in the history of the world. And so, as we led up to the French Revolution, which basically was started due to the social order, the first, second, and third estates, with the first estate being the clergy, the second estate, the nobility, and the third estate, the commoners and the bourgeoisie. The taxation issue, certain estates didn't have to pay taxes, or they could easily get out of paying those taxes, and the third estate having to pay all the taxes. There was frustration about that. And so those things pretty much led to division and civil unrest in and throughout France. So after the French Revolution comes to a conclusion, they kill the king. Louis XVI was the king on the throne at the time, and his wife Marie Antoinette. They put both of them on the guillotine and cut their heads off. So France was left without a ruler. In comes a gentleman by the name of Napoleon Bonaparte, who is from Corsica, Italy, and who starts out in the military. He gets a lot of notoriety because of his military expertise and his tactics and strategies, and he's winning. He's winning a lot of battles against a lot of French enemies. And he's using a lot of propaganda and good sounding words to get people to do what he needs them to do. So Napoleon has a very critical role in French history during the time as we close out the French Revolution. But we do understand that when the people in France killed their king, they did that because they did not like an absolute ruler. And Napoleon comes along and it becomes another absolute ruler, from doing things like considering himself first consul to consul for life to emperor, and okay, the same things that a king would do, and just pretty much telling everybody, oh, you're going to do what I say. Even though he sets up meritocracies, which pretty much eliminates the original plan for the nobility, he sets up plebiscites, which were democratic forums where people could actually vote on specific issues, but he still maintained absolute power. And he also got involved in a lot of wars. He won many, but he also had a lot of failures. He went into Egypt and it was almost like a disaster, but some really good things came out of it. A great discovery, the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, whom Britain took credit for. But nonetheless, that was our week in revolving around those objectives and speaking on the enduring effects and how even today we question our leadership if we think that things are done in an unfair manner or unjustly. We question those things. We'll still go out into the streets today and burn things to the ground if people aren't listening. So we have expectations for our government, and we have expectations for how we should be treated as human beings, for our individual liberty. We don't want to be taxed unnecessarily or without justification. We don't want to be ignored. So that was our week. Now, your choice activity for this week, which will be due on Monday of next week, will include similar options that you had chosen on the past two choice activities, such as you can do a PowerPoint. This time, if you're going to do a PowerPoint, you need 10 slides. Last time, you only had to have 8. This time, you need 10, so just add 2 more if you are doing a PowerPoint. There's a list on what I've provided for you. You can choose 8 of 10 of those items, or you can just choose 1 or 2 and make sure you spend 10 slides talking about the information. You can add a title slide, but be sure you have 10 slides of information about the items. Then you can choose to do a YouTube video. This time you can do a skit, or you can do one alone, wherein you pretend to be a reporter and give us information about one of the topics that are listed: the 7 Years' War, the French Revolution, the American Revolution, the Enlightenment, the Wars of Napoleon, Napoleon and Josephine, Louis the 16th, Louis the 18th, Louis the 14th. Okay, there's a bunch of Louis. So that's also something that you can do. You can create a timeline. You can pick 8 events for your timeline. The events need to take place between the year 1500 and 1800, and they need to include the topics, the topics that are listed. Okay, pick 8 of those events and put them in chronological order on a timeline and annotate. Tell me what happened, what that event was about. Or you can choose to do a compare and contrast activity, wherein you would be comparing and contrasting the French Revolution to the American Revolution, the English Civil War versus the American Civil War, or even more currently, you can choose to compare the American Revolution to the Black Lives Matter movement, or the women's rights issues under Napoleon versus the current Me Too movement. So those are some items if you want to write a 3-paragraph compare contrast essay. Be sure to pick just one of those topics and compare and contrast them. If you end up with 5 paragraphs, that's great, but at least have 3 paragraphs where you give me an introduction, body, and a conclusion. Okay, tell them what you're going to tell them. Tell them what you told them. Okay, make sure you have a thesis, a main claim. Okay, what are you going to spend this entire essay talking about? What item did you pick? And give me some details, some examples, and compare and contrast, and then close it back up. Okay, go all the way back to the top. Reiterate your introduction. Okay, go back and say, okay, this essay was about the French Revolution versus the American Revolution. Okay, make it like that. And if you have questions about that, please send me an email, tjcooper@jmcss.org. Or you can also, if you don't want to choose the essay component of the compare contrast, you can draw a graphic organizer. The 2 big bubbles. You can do that. If you draw that on paper, excuse me, I'm sorry, I've been talking all week. But if you draw that on paper, take a picture of it and send it to my email, tjcooper@jmcss.org. The quiz on Friday, the chapter 1 information. Think about witches in Lancaster County. Think about the bell ringer that you had that discussed how that was a phenomenon. And one of the reasons why the Enlightenment was very important, because we had to keep people from thinking about, looking for witches and finding everybody and thinking everybody was a witch and burning them in the middle of the street. The Palace of Versailles, the Petition of Right, the Divine Right of Kings, the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, the Restoration, Oliver Cromwell, Louis the 14th, Cardinal Richelieu, Cardinal Mazarin, Ivan the Terrible, Peter the Great, Frederick William, Queen Elizabeth I, the 30 Years' War. In Chapter 2, we were talking about René Descartes, John Locke, rationalism, empiricism, scientific method, Francis Bacon, inductive reasoning, Voltaire, Montesquieu, Diderot, Isaac Newton, the philosophes, the concept of laissez-faire, the Magna Carta, the feudal system, Mary Wollstonecraft, the Declaration of Rights and Grievances, Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Plenty of people had a struggle saying his name, but it looks like John, but it's pronounced like Jean, but it's Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Mozart, women's rights, the term arbitrary, the term salons, illegitimate. John Wesley was associated with the Methodist Church. The information from Chapter 3, I want you to be clear on the situation with the Bastille, understanding estates, who was in what estate and what was making one of those estates very upset, and who had to pay taxes, who didn't have to pay taxes. Talk about the bourgeoisie, We talked about the National Assembly, the tennis court oath, reforms that were made to the church and how the church responded. And this is not the Protestant Reformation. This is not this chapter. In this particular chapter, there was a reading that you should have listened to that discussed how in France they made some changes to the church. The church had a lot of land, the church had a lot of money, the church didn't pay taxes. So they made some reforms and make sure you're clear on those things. Then coming into Napoleon, where was he born? How did he rise to power? And the war, at least one of the wars, but be able to discuss wars that he fought. And why did other European nations build multiple coalitions against him? You were given an outline, a very important document. Be sure that you have this outline. If you need it again, if you need me to resend it to you, let me know. But there were all types of very critical pieces of information in this outline that went further into detail about Napoleon's reign and even to his decline and even afterward. And pay attention to the review questions that were on that outline, because I will probably use some of those questions as well. For the week in review, basically we had to complete all the engagement activities for Chapter 3. We did those things, bell ringers and exit tickets and Google Forms. If there are days that you missed class, please go back to your email and click those links so that you can get those things completed. There were assignments, flex assignments, in Edmentum posted in your Clever portal. Please work at your own pace and submit those items at the designated due date. There were vocabulary activities available for you at vocabulary.com. You can access that through Google Classroom. Your quiz is tomorrow. We had a live session on Monday. We had a live session on Wednesday. The Friday session tomorrow will also be live, but it will just be your quiz, and it will be a long quiz. So you will not have a bell ringer. You will not have an exit ticket. You will have the entire class time to complete that quiz. If you will need more than the class time, I will have to end the meeting, but you can only submit your quiz once. So be sure that you take the time that you need and submit it, and be comfortable with what you submit. We met on Teams every day this week except Wednesday. We practiced with Zoom, and thank you for all coming to Zoom with me, those of you that could get there. The distance learners were able to pick up packets on Monday. If you needed to do that, that those things will still be there if you want to come on this Monday. And basically, that was the week. So I just wanted to make sure that you were clear on those items and be aware of the choice activity. And if you have additional questions, please reach out to me and ask me those questions. I'm going to have this video posted and possibly one or two other videos posted for you on the Teams meeting scheduled for today. So thank you. Peace and love until next time.